Yay Networks.
What's up, everybody? This is your boy Cornelius, back with another episode of This Is Life. Wanted to sit down and talk with my boy Kris, man. We had an awesome conversation, man, maybe like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, we got to sit down and we got to talk about this. It's church stuff. But I feel like it's good church stuff. And yeah, bro. So you want to introduce yourself to the people? Kind of let them know who you are, where you been, where you from. We kind of
Yeah.
who you run with, who you don't run with, everything you want to share.
Yeah. Man, my name is Kris. I grew up here in Los Angeles. Regarding the church stuff, man, been a church planter for a bunch of years. Planted a church in North Hollywood. Grew up in the streets, man. Grew up gangbanging. Planted a church back in my neighborhood. Been through the ups and downs of ministry and church planting and you know, for the last probably 15 years been in that world, man. And so, yeah, man.
So you planted a church.
Mm-hmm.
How long did you pastor that church?
So from the beginning to the end, it was about 7 years.
7 years. And what was that experience like?
Man, you know, it was full of highs and full of lows. You know, so I ended up kind of my story, met Jesus while incarcerated, and just had a heart for my community, and so went back. Ended up in the church, kind of outside of that community, and then just realized there was just a big need, and so just had when you start out in ministry, and
right.
when you there's you have all these I would say naive kind of goodwill, going into that, and so we went out with it, man, and launched a church in our community, and seen a ton of good things happen, man.
Right.
I got to see tons of people's lives change. I mean, even to this day, I still get phone calls and text messages and emails, and you just watch people, especially I think one of the dope things of social media, man, you get to just keep up with people's lives, and so you get to see, the fruit of that, man, and so we had a lot of good things happen, man.
Right.
But also with that, got to see the kind of beyond the veil of maybe the church world.
Take us beyond the veil. What did you see? I mean, you brought it up. Take us beyond the veil. What did you see?
Yeah, man. And so we planted in our community, launched. Really didn't. When we went out, I didn't really know much about what it means to launch a church. There's obviously tons of different approaches and tons of different understandings, or just in ideas on how that should be done. And so whether I don't know which one's necessarily right, you know what I mean? But kind of how we launched, we launched in our community with like 7 people, man. We had no money, no idea what we were doing. Just kind of went out for it, man, and with that, got connected to some different organizations that were, I mean, for the most part, like I felt like we had some really good support from some peoples. You know what I mean? We had some really good support for some peoples. Had some good friends, man, who were there for us. But then also, man, as things started progressing, just started to see kind of some of that brokenness that kind of comes alongside of that. I think as I look back and reflect on it, I think I've been processing a lot of it over these last few years. Our church shut down 4 years ago, so 2018 we ended up closing the doors. But some of the things I started processing, I think there's the in the American church, I think there's almost this like there's this like mythology of church planting. There's this like and when I think of mythology, you know what I mean? This is kind of the way I've been thinking about it a lot lately. You know, there's mythology is kind of like the stories we tell ourselves about things, you know, and in mythology, in all these great myth, there's these heroes and there's this grand narrative, you know. And so when you think of like the mythology of kind of like of church planting in America, you know, it's this there's these stories of these heroes, right? Like there's these church planters who are these heroes, and they're going into these communities and they're building these big movements, and they're saving the day, right? And you're going into all this, you know, and that's kind of how it's pitched, right? Like the world's falling apart, and so you're gonna go out and you're gonna be the hero, and you're the Navy SEALs of the church going out into these communities, those plant churches, you know. And so there's the mythology of church planting, right?
Right.
And then there's the machine of church planting, right?
Right.
And so the machine of church planting is a lot has to deal with a lot of the denominations and the networks and the funding structures, you know. Right. And so those funding structures kind of use the mythology to kind of like fuel their things, right? And then with that, they find the heroes, right? These guys who want to be heroes or whatever, you know. And not to say that like, you know, like that's always a bad thing, right? Like sometimes you want to go in, you want to do good things, you know. A community I come from, man, I look at it and I'm like, man, I want to see my community change, you know. I've buried tons and tons and tons and tons of friends, you know, like see the brokenness, and so you want to go out. And so with that, the way that those metrics are kind of defined, you know, and so you got the mythology, then you got the machine, but then you got the reality of what these communities need. And I think sometimes those things don't kind of match up, right? And so when those things kind of, you know, when the reality of something and the needs of something kind of don't match up with kind of that the goals of the machine, you know, and it doesn't really, you know, then it starts getting weird. You know what I mean? And so we went out and we planted, and then as we started like really trying to address the needs of our community, man, you know, things got complicated, and we started pushing back on some of the requirements of some of these networks or some of the requirements of some of these denominations. Some of that pushback started getting crazy, you know, and that pushback was now that stuff's attached to funding, and then that funding, and then all of a sudden now you're like, nah, homie, like I'm not gonna dance for you, dog. Like you tripping.
You know what I mean? Prostitute myself for you.
Like you start feeling like a little bit like, you know, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait a second, hold up. Like now you're the story, you know, especially, you know, I realize, you know, for me being like a dude from the streets who's planting a church back in my community, you know, it's like, oh, that's a marketable story.
That's a marketable story.
That feeds the mythology, right? Like that feeds
and the machine.
And the machine, right? It raises money. That's you know, and then you start realizing like, well, hold up, and then that starts messing with, you know, and then for me as an individual, as I started kind of processing some of that stuff, and I look back, I started bringing up, you know, some of my, you know, when I look at some of my, man, you know, growing up, you know, parents on drugs, dad on the streets, you know, grew up gangbanging, you know, by 19, got shot, stabbed, been incarcerated multiple years, you know what I mean? Like that stuff started messing with, like, started bringing up stuff, you know what I mean? Producing anxiety and all kinds of crazy stuff. And it just got crazy, man. And then you start seeing like all the, you know, I think because of some of that mythology, right, and some of that machine, you know, it draws people who want to be important, you know, and so then you start seeing all the ways that, you know, there's, you know, the clubs that kind of form in these tribes and the cool people, and then all the like, and you're like, homie, this ain't even like, when I read the scriptures, this ain't what I see, bro, you know, and so
you, I mean, and you kind of talked about that just then, about the behind the veil stuff, And I feel like there are so many other church planters, so many other pastors, so many other people who are in it or used to be in it, who see the same thing. It's just, it's not talked about. Yeah. You know, you don't talk about, one of the worst places that I dread even going, I don't even walk into them now, was the green room.
Oh, that's weird. Yeah.
I just dreaded the green room. Yeah. Cause it was like, it turned into like the cool kids club, you know? And I never forget being at a church conference. And you know, we got tickets to go Like our tickets allowed for us to go into the green room.
Yeah.
When we went in the green room, there's food in the back, and there's, you got all these different drinks. Everybody's serving you, and then you went back out, and then you sat with everybody else who wasn't allowed that access.
Yeah.
And then you're seated in the VIP set. It was, and I understand what it was and why they have it, but at the same time, it was like, I remember asking my wife, like, do we even like this? Like, I almost prefer to sit back there in the back, because if I'm up here in the front, it's almost like I gotta pay attention, because now I feel like people are watching me.
Yeah, I think part of, like, I remember we were talking, and when we met the other day, I was telling you about a story, like, it's interesting, because I've been invited to, like, those little, to the green room parties, or like those special, like those private events, at conferences with speakers, and I remember just being one time, and, like, if I'm honest, like, there's part of me that kind of, like, that made me feel important, right? Like, it's like, oh, like, I'm desired, I'm wanted, like, people want me around, like, and it fuels some of that. I think it fuels some of that, like, that desire for value and worth, you know what I mean? And there's a part of that like, that's enticing, you know what I mean? It's enticing to be, it's why people chase celebrities all the time, you know what I mean? There's this, it's this enticing desire to be around importance, you know what I mean, or glory or whatever, and, like, and I remember, like, I never really sat right with me, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know if part of that's from the streets, like, it's like, I ain't holding nobody's pocket, dog, like, I don't care who you are, homie, like, but, like, but I just remember one time, man, there was this, I remember I was at this one conference, and then there was this private, party that everyone knew about, that all the, like, speakers were going to, and it was just it sounds so dirty talking about it, man. And it sounds so dirty.
Private party with preachers? Oh, I already know what was there.
It sounds so weird, bro. Like, and I remember this gentleman who's like a big brother to me, man. Like, I was on like he asked me, he's like, hey, you want to go to dinner? And I was like, I gotta go somewhere. And he looks at me and he's like, you can go with the cool kids. And I remember that question, man. Like, that question, it ate in my soul, man. And it was like, it reminded me of that passage, is like, you want the best seats in the synagogue. You know what I mean? Like, you want to. It's like this. I mean, there's nothing new, right? In this, like, this ain't nothing new. Like, people been doing this for generations, And so I remember sitting there like, nah, man. Like, nah, let's go to dinner, bro. You know what I mean? Like. And I remember from that day, I was like, nah, I ain't about to be about this, because it's just not the way of Jesus.
Yeah.
It's just not the way of Jesus, man.
Yeah. I had an older pastor. He told me, I remember calling him, 'cause I got invited to a, kind of something like that. It was private thing, round table kind of thing. I remember saying to him, I was like, I really don't want to go.
Yeah.
He was like, well, John Maxwell is going to be there and this person. I was like, you know what? I don't know how to say this, but I really don't care nothing about them people. Like, they don't. I'm not enticed by that. And he was like, well, you need to go because you need the fellowship and be with those people in the room, and those should be your brothers, and that should be a thing. But just like you said, it was almost like, I thought about it. I ended up going because he was telling me I needed to go, but I remember just getting there, and I remember thinking to myself, like, if we weren't pastors, I don't think I would ever be y'all friends. Like, I was like, we really have nothing in common, and I don't necessarily think that I like, anything that y'all do. It's just, I just seem like I didn't fit. I didn't belong. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. Give online therapy a try at BetterHelp.com/Lindsay's and get on your way to being your best self. Hey, you know what? We all need somebody who can walk along with us, and someone who can add verbiage and language to our pain. Someone who can help us be at our best, because when we're at our best, we can really do great things. And working with a therapist can help you get closer to the best version of you. Because when you feel empowered, you're more prepared to take on everything life throws at you. Now, we love BetterHelp. We send everyone to BetterHelp. Why? Because we know that they are the best at what they do. If you're thinking of giving therapy a try, BetterHelp is a great option. It's convenient, flexible, affordable, and entirely online. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Now, if you want to live a more empowered life, therapy can get you there.
Visit betterhelp.com/Lindsay's, LINDSEYS, today to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Lindsay's, LINDSEYS. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/Lindsay's, LINDSEYS.
I think there's so many other church planters and pastors and people who are having these same thoughts, and there has to be something different that's done, bro. Like there has to be a change. There has to be a shift, because if not, it's just going to keep producing the same old thing. And now we have, unfortunately, we have churches now that are being produced that look exactly the same. It's a bottle, it's a box, it's a system. This is what you give, and no matter if you're in Kansas City or if you're in New York City, it all just starts to look the same.
Yeah, I think to speak to that a little bit, I think how we define success, which I think that's, when I look at there's all this there's just all this talk, especially like politically, right? Like with all these political things going on and all the stuff going on in the world right now, like especially in America, there's all this talk about like Christian nationalism, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times that's like viewed as like, that's interpreted as like kind of like Christianity kind of like married to like right-wing politics, But what's interesting, what's Christian nationalism as well, I think, is when we pick up the values of our culture, and then the values of the culture then they're appropriated by the church. And I think one of the things that's very nationalistic to America is kind of like the idolatry of people, man. Like you know what I mean? And so the way that we define success is like bigger and better, and so we attribute like influence to authority. So if someone's got influence and they got authority, it's like, I mean, we should know from our celebrities now, right? Like just because you got influence doesn't mean you should be the one who's speaking. You know what I mean? And so we listen to people because they got big followings on social media. We listen to people but influence doesn't mean you have spiritual authority. Right. You know what I mean? And so what happens is, if you think of like the conferences and the things that are promote, it's always the guy with the bigger church speaking. It's always the person with the large amount of followers who has an influence, or who has the last say in certain things or something. And you're like, you know what? That's just not what I read in the text. Right. You know what I mean? That's not the Jesus I know. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's like man, like you, like it's actually like there's people like the way of Jesus is Jesus was constantly shying away from those things. And it's not that, like, I don't want to say that influence is evil, because influence is not evil, right? Just like power is not evil. It's just the misuse of power that's evil. So how you use your influence, and there's people who God promotes, you know what I mean? And like God's going to promote people to certain places. But that doesn't mean just because you've been promoted means that you're the one who's speaking on behalf of Jesus. Right. You know what I mean? And so, but I think because in our culture, our culture looks at things like influence and following and all these things as authority. We've just attributed these things to success, right? And so, but like when you think of like when I look at when I look at what it means to actually honor God in a community, like sometimes that means church is shutting down. Sometimes that means we're coming in and sometimes that means I'm actually doing things that look counterproductive, because the mission of God is not just to grow his influence. Like, man, if you go read the prophets, right? Like you go read the prophets, God's like, man, I'm gonna stretch my people out in front of everybody. I don't give a darn what nobody thinks. Right. You know what I mean? And you're like, but God, that's gonna make you look bad. And he don't got an identity crisis. Like he ain't tripping. Like, cool. Like everybody, if my people are in sin, I'm going to make them look like fools in front of everybody to judge them, because I want to bring them, because God disciplines those whom he loves, right? And so when you think through that, right, when you look at that, you're like, man, the way of Jesus isn't like God doesn't have an identity crisis, man. And so when you're going into a community and you're looking at like, man, what's the best thing for you? And that's some of the things we came up against when I was church planting. I was coming into a community that was being heavily gentrified. You know what I mean? And when it was, so you have poverty, man. Then you got like, You know, we were in North Hollywood where we planted. So you got like the music industry, you got the movie industry coming in, you got Burbank on this side, you got white people, black people, Hispanic people, you got people being displaced. And so one of the things that as I started like praying and studying the text and just asking Jesus what was best for my community was what I started realizing was, man, the issues in my city are interconnected. And the way of Jesus isn't just getting people saved. Like Jesus is coming in to bring like shalom to my city, to bring renewal, to bring peace to my city, which means I got to start working through the dynamics of like the social ills, man. It means I got to start calling people out and being like, I got to tell poor people, like, you got dignity, you got something to say too. Like I got to actually come into this place and be like, hey, maybe you shouldn't start your business here. Maybe you shouldn't move into this community. Hey, maybe, like I get that, like your grandma told you that you're supposed to be an actor, or like somebody told you that you got a good voice, but like you need to go back to like Pennsylvania, dog. Like you ain't, I don't know, go back to where you're from. Like stop coming to my city and just using my city. Like, wow. You know what I mean? And like some of that means you're doing things that look counterproductive. Like discipleship isn't always like, you know, so it's like, okay, I got all these people coming in. Well, maybe you have all these, like, and I'm not saying that like big churches are evil either, right? Like, man, sometimes God is doing a move and there's people who are getting saved and there's tons of people coming to Christ. Good stuff. But that doesn't mean a church that's small. Like I know churches that I got a homie in South Central right now that's been laboring, man, for years. And there's like 30 people at his church. But you know what? What he's doing is like so impactful to that community. Like we don't know the future and the way of God. Yeah. You know what I mean? And sometimes like what God is asking us to do is God put his people in exile for tons of years, you know what I mean? Like, so when you think through that, like the way that we'd have to define success is not just bigger and better and greater and influence. The way we define success is faithfulness. And the way we define success does this community actually exemplify the way of the kingdom? Are we actually doing kingdom work in this community that where the people around us and the city around us is looking more like the kingdom of God? Right. That's how you define success. You know what I mean? And so with that, I think I think there's not really like, there's not a lot of like marks of success or metrics that represent that. And so now you have these pastors and these who are kind of getting drawn into this thing, who are standing up against these images that I don't think are given by God. And so there's this kind of imposter syndrome or this feeling of failures that's just kind of unnecessary sometimes, you know what I mean? And then when you think of like some of the funding structures, you know, it's like, man, a lot of the funding structures for a lot of church planting, right? It's like, well, we'll give you funding for 3 years or whatever, right? But you got a community that's like that's cool. And like if you're a church in like, a perfect example, if you're a church in Burbank, you know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, like if you get to like real talk, like you get to like, I mean, we talk like realistically about funding, right? Like the average church person in a well-off community is going to give $100 a month, right? Like let's just talk about giving structure, right? Like, because that's real, right? Churches have to sustain. How are they going to sustain, right? Like you get 100 people, how much money is that, right? Now so maybe, sure, in like 3 years you could sustain off that. Now you get a church in the hood, it's like, okay, in 3 years, like, okay, you get 100 people. The average person is like, I'm not going to tell you like, I don't know, like, bro, like these people are poor. Like some of these people can't. I remember sitting with one of my homies, he's like, man, I want to give. You know, as a guy I grew up with in the streets. And I'm like, all right, well, let's work through your budget. I'm sitting there going through his budget. And I'm like, yeah, I don't know, dog. Like,
there ain't no way you can give.
I don't know. Just show up and serve. Set up chairs, bro. Like I'm not gonna tell you. And it's like, and I'm not telling you like the dude is. And maybe he was already in some unhealthy debt and all this different stuff. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, man, it's so much like I don't give a darn about the sustenance of my community as much as I do. But I'm saying as much as I want this guy to know that God loves him, man. Right. I want him to know that God cares about his Like he's not gonna be like, I don't think faithfulness always looks one certain way. But like if you think about that, man, we're working through more complex issues in this community. In 3 years, I don't like. What do you want? It costs more money. We were paying $4,000 a month to rent an elementary school on Sundays. Jeez. You know what I mean? With a community that's marginalized. And I'm sitting here like, So like you got to think of funding structures. But like if you're not the, so then now they're like, as time goes by, they pull funding. There's not sustainability. So you take all of this different stuff and you take that pressure and it's put on people. And then you got these pastors like trying to run to the top, and they're just like, man, I think it creates unhealth.
Yeah. I think it's a great conversation, that needs to be had. It's a great conversation we need to continue to have. I want to appreciate you for even being open to even starting this conversation with so many people. How can the people get in contact with you? And here's the thing. Listen to me. If you are a church planter or you want to be a church planter or you're a preacher, a pastor, listen, I sat down with this guy. We sat down for 2 hours and talked. I want to encourage you to reach out to him. And the reason why is because not just his wisdom from his experiences, but because of his depth of knowledge as it relates to, church planting, but also humanity. And I think that a lot of church planters forget the concept of humanity because we say we want to reach people, but then the machine starts and then you forget about the people because you forget about humanity. So how can the people get in contact with you?
Yeah, man. I mean, you can follow me on social media. Just my name, Kris Brossett, KrisBrossett. I'm on Instagram, Facebook, whatever. Hit me up. Yeah, man, just get at me.
Yeah,
definitely love to help any way. Like I'm pro. Like, don't get me wrong, man. I'm pro church planting. Like I'm pro church planting. I'm pro the church.
He's actually getting ready to plant another church.
Stop it. Stop it.
My bad. Maybe not. Maybe not. My bad.
Nah, but I'm pro church planting, man. I'm pro the church, man. I think that's one of the side too. I think that's one other element of things. Like don't get it twisted. Like, man, people be bashing the church, man. Like that's got like you can't invite me to a party without my wife. You know what I mean? Like that's my wife. You know what I mean? We can't sit in a conversation. You can be talking about my wife. I'm like, we might have to get them up. You know what I mean? Like, but it's like real talk. Like that's Jesus's bride. The church is Jesus's bride.
And we want her to be the best that she can be. And I think that's why we have to continue to have these conversations because it allows for us to flesh out and to be able to discuss. Okay, these are where our holes are.
Yeah,
and these are places we need to fix it. So y'all need to make sure y'all get in contact with Kris, man. I appreciate you even being on the show, bro.
Yeah, heck yeah, bro.
Make sure that y'all subscribe, log in with us, stick with us. Wherever Kris is going, make sure you follow him. Make sure you stick with him. Make sure you reach out to him, church planters, preachers, pastors. Make sure you reach out to this guy. Just sit down, have a conversation. If it's over Zoom, over phone, over coffee, I guarantee you will not be disappointed, man. Again, Kris, I appreciate you, bro.
Yeah, 100%.
All right, y'all. We love y'all. Introducers. I'm out. See y'all next week.